What's up, world? It's Nate the Great from Flight 214, and it may come as no surprise, but we here at Flight 214 are huge fans of street art. I personally have always favored the raw and creative expression of the art form, but today we'll be running down a complete, well, sort of complete, history of street art from its humble and illegal beginnings to its worldwide success of today. It's pretty much become consensus that street art originated from the graffiti art scene, and although graffiti is believed to date back as far as ancient Rome, where it was used as a primitive social media of sorts. Art, and I mean art asses, not monsters, because after all, this is ancient Rome, right? Oh, but no, really. Artful wise guys used it as a way to lambaste their local politicians or aristocrats, boast of sexual prowess, or even champion their favorite gladiator. But graffiti as we know it today gained rise in the 60s and 70s. The impact of the subversive culture was imparted by artists looking for a place to make art while reacting and rebelling against society's rules. Let's think about it for a second. When does vandalism become art? For some, it's a doodle in the bathroom stall that makes them smile. For others, it's the moment they encounter a large-scale painting on an unlikely street corner. Street art has long and controversial history, but in recent years, it has evolved and been reinvented as a high art form. More and more artists who appropriate public spaces are also harnessing market forces for their own gain. Now, what is graffiti exactly? Graffiti originally referred to the guerrilla art form on inner city walls and train lines. One of the earliest forms of graffiti was tagging, or the use of elaborate typography to encode the painter's names on the side of buildings or subway cars. Artists also got extra points for tagging insanely inaccessible locations, often at great heights, and taggers competed to outdo one another. This insular group determined skill by evaluating control of the spray paint and developing their own unique typography marks. And from the beginning, this form was meant to be transgressive. In a world dominated by global branding, graffiti alienated the power of commercialism and government infrastructure. Viewed negatively by politicians and the affluent communities because of its association with gang culture, but as in ancient Rome, the artwork served as a way for the disenfranchised groups to express their dissatisfaction with society. Street art was also closely tied to the hip-hop culture, and because of this, many artists began working in New York, but the medium rapidly expanded to urban centers across the United States. Rap legend Fab Five Freddy was intimately tied to the graffiti community through artists including Keith Haring and Michel Basquiat. Keith Haring, who in his younger years drew hundreds of chalk images on NYC subways in the 80s. His style was distinct, and he was known for his bold outlines, vivid colors, and signature radiant baby motif. Like many street artists, Haring's work was inseparable from his activism. He was influenced by the AIDS crisis to create work that sent a message to society about the dangers of prejudice. Haring's friend and now posthumously infamous Jean-Michel Basquiat began his career by spray painting enigmatic epigrams on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the 1970s. By the 80s, he had found and befriended fellow artist Andy Warhol, and the two became frequent collaborators. In the significant art movement, the Whitney Museum of American Art held a retrospective of Basquiat's work in '92. Today, his pieces reside in the collections of nearly every major institution and the private stashes of many prominent collectors. But street art was definitely not just the NYC thing. As graffiti spread its wings, each city developed their own hometown heroes. And in Washington, D.C., it was Takei 183, a moniker that combined his nickname and the number of the street where he lived. Now, Takei 183's canvases sell for thousands at auction. Renowned contemporary artist Barry Mcgee is considered to be one of the most pivotal members of the street art movement. Born and raised in San Francisco, Mcgee's work is inspired by bold, cartoon-like forms. He uses his pieces to draw attention to the large homeless population in the Bay Area. His wife and fellow artist, Margaret Kilgallen, was also a strong voice in the street art community before her untimely death in 2001, and is one of the few female artists recognized in the field. street art continued to branch out and spread across the world. Some artists began to use stencils to create more elaborate works, including portraits and landscapes, while others continued to use spray paint to put up murals around their cities. In the early 80s, Clarett pioneered stencil art in Paris. The artist's rat stencils alluded to the controlling nature of state power in the French capital and served as a way of bringing art out of the traditional gallery setting. His use of ready-made stencils allowed him to work quickly and move out before the cops moved in. In Britain, street art has become synonymous with one name: Banksy. The enigmatic artist, whose identity to this day is virtually unknown, was directly influenced by Clarett to create politically charged stencils and installation pieces. Banksy began to create pieces in Bristol in the 90s, but now travels all around the world in pursuit of shocking new backdrops for his work. Far from his humble beginnings, Banksy was recently the subject of a critically acclaimed documentary, Exit Through the Gift Shop, and his prolific line of quote-unquote made-for-sale works now circulate the secondary market. If you haven't seen that documentary, it's a really good watch, but part of the film covered the now precarious position much of the infamous street artist's work finds itself in. Turns out, some shop owners could give a Clarett's ass how famous the graffiti on the side of their building is. To them, it's just graffiti. Art fans were horrified to learn that works of art were being power washed down the street gutter. I mean, imagine if the Mona Lisa had been painted on the side of a city building, and along comes the landlord and says, "Screw you, Leonardo da Vinci, this is vandalism." This brings us back to the fence-teetering dilemma that surrounds street art from day one. Yes, it is art, and yes, it can be expressively brilliant, but yes, it is also vandalism in a manner of speaking. Some have even gone as far as paying to have Banksy's work carved from the substrate in which it sits, a process that the documentary explains is rather pricey and a bit questionable. Today, street artists continue to evolve. Artists like Kaws, who designs vinyl toys, clothing, and various other mediums, began gaining popularity a few years back. In fact, many artists working today have achieved mainstream success, like American artist Shepard Fairey and French artist Invader. Fairey, originally of Obey fame, first gained international attention during the 2008 presidential election for his iconic Hope poster, which features the then presidential candidate Barack Obama. Only 8 years later, his work is now featured in the permanent collections of the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and the V&A in London. Invader's pixelated video game-like installations have appeared in over 65 cities, in major gallery exhibitions, and at auction. But despite this success, these artists and their contemporaries still find themselves on the wrong side of the law for their sometimes unsanctioned public displays, and in Fairey's case, having his chops busted even after being sanctioned. Check out Obey Giant for an in-depth on that, another great documentary by the way. While still divisive in the treatment of urban architecture, street art has nonetheless become an economically viable art form. In 2014, Phillips sold Banksy's submerged phone booth for a whopping £722,500, then the third most expensive Banksy sold at auction, and the artist's highest paid sculpture ever offered. That same year, Sotheby's auctioned off an untitled Keith Haring canvas from 1986 for $4,869,000. These top dollar examples demonstrate that what emerged as a grassroots movement has evolved into an internationally recognized art form that collectors will continue to compete for at the highest levels. But this is not just a story about graffiti. Although street art owes part of its glory to this kind of artistic expression, it is a marvelous form of art in its own right, and it's amazing to follow the evolution and diversity of street art in the 21st century. It's changed the way we view and perceive art. Before, only two mediums were respected in the art world: oil paint and sculpture. Now we have spray paint, stencil, graphic art, and much more. The street art movement has really done a lot to gain admiration from various other art forms. and I for one can't wait to see where it takes us going forward. So if you're as big a street art fan as I am and you enjoyed this video, then give us a like, and if you haven't, why not? Be sure to hit the subscribe button to be notified whenever we drop a new great video. And if you like to adorn your walls in some dope street art in its own right, stop by our shop at takeflight214.com and pick up a few pieces, cause blank walls are boring. So for flight214.com, I'm Nate the Great. Till next time, signing out.